Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of September 24th, 2023. Today, we have a fascinating conversation with you today about the effort of the company Austin Biotec to extend reproductive longevity and also human lifespan and health. And joining us today is our panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our current Vice Chairman and Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Citizen and Community Science and 2024 U.S. Vice Presidential Candidate, Daniel Tweed, and our special guest today, returning for the second time as the guest of honor for our Virtual Enlightenment Salon, is Zack Varkaris. Zack is the founder and scientific director of Austin Biotec, which works in the anti-aging and fertility domains and applies emerging medical technologies in the effort to overcome the problem of female infertility. But as Zack will discuss, they are doing much more than that. He is also a biologist, author, diver, and sporting pugilist of Greek descent. Zack grew up in London. After studying marine biology at Heriot-Watt University, he spent a number of years in the field of renewable energy and conservation before turning his hand at writing novels and then also venturing into the medical field. So really quite a Renaissance man whom I've been pleased to get to know quite well over the past year. Also, I would highly recommend that anybody who hasn't seen our Virtual Enlightenment Salon with Zack from the previous year, from November 27th, 2022, please take a look at it, because that was the beginning of our in-depth conversation about the efforts of Austin Biotec. So today, Zack is going to provide us an update about the progress of that work over the past year. And certainly there is much to discuss. So Zack, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Gennady. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on again. Really appreciate that. And yeah, so what I'd like to really do is, and thank you everyone else on the panel. I've spoken to you guys subsequently since last November to varying depths and details. So thanks for being on here today. And today I just want to give you an update about where we are and what we've done so far and since last year. And then also to talk about some of the ideas that we've got from what the results that we have and how we're progressing forward with that. And as with all these things, you start off with a plan and you think you have the answer. And then 6 months down the road, you suddenly have to do maybe a 45-degree shift and not 180, but a 45-degree shift because you realize that things are not as straightforward as you thought they were, or the angles you were looking at were not the same. So I think one of the biggest shifts that's happened with us, and I think it's very important for what you guys do at the Transhumanist Party, the US Transhumanist Party, is that we are focusing much more, pivoting much more into the fact of having a fully functioning and fit reproductive system combined with aesthetic maintenance is the foundation for a fully extended life. And it's not about having children, it's about the ability to be reproductively fit that gives you a sense of longevity. So what we mean by that is that take yourself as a building, human being as a building, and sits on a piece of land, and that land you have the rights to for 125 years. Now, Bill Andrews, who's not on here today, but would maybe dispute that exact number. But just say you have, after 125 years, your genes, your DNA unravels. But that building starts to fall apart at 40 years. It's just the reality. Whether it's the windows or the plumbing or the furniture, something, everything's falling apart. So what we're about is maximizing that 125-year life patch in giving you the functionality of a fit 37-year-old, 35 to 40-year-old. And that is very achievable. And when we spoke last year, it was very much about, well, you have to do a stem cell procedure to make this work. And that's still the case. But what we've discovered is that we can get 70% of the efficacy of the full range of procedures for 15% of the cost. And so you guys being US transhumanists and having a lot of, should we say, libertarian leanings, maybe I shouldn't say the L word, I'm not sure, but in terms of that sense of being self-sufficient, we are able to offer procedures, or a lot of the efficacy of those procedures, for a fraction of the cost until you need to get the really heavy hitting stuff, which it changes the dynamics a lot, because I think a lot of people, when they think of longevity, they think of very rich people who don't know what to spend their money on and spend a lot of money every year and keeping themselves looking young. Whilst what they do is fantastic, it's not applicable to the wider audience. And that's really where what we've discovered. And when we spoke last year, we only had minimal results. Now we have a full range of candidates for the second phase. There's numbering, again, only small numbers, only 50 people in this range. But we've discovered that there's been a huge uptake in terms of their youthful functions, and they're not necessarily reversing the age process, but they've certainly slowed it. And in some cases, they have seen some visible signs of youthful re-blooming. So the reason we took, as we said, female reproductive systems is because there's a very clear defining step with women called the menopause, whereby when they go through menopause, they start to age more rapidly. Now, men, we have it, but as I said, it starts at 18 and we just fall off a cliff. We just think we're invincible. And that's the slight difference. So what we've discovered is that when you have the issues when you go through menopause, you have issues of hair, skin, brain fog, emotional swings of emotion, bone density, hydration issues, muscle retention issues. And these are sort of broken down into three basic factors: water or hydration, protein synthesis and retention, and fat as a form of keeping hydration within any given cell structure. And to break that down again, what we've done is we've taken a very, should we say, structured layered procedure. So what we do is we have everyone on an interview and a process, so we find out what their strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, the biggest thing is that you're only really as strong as the weakest link in your chain. And so some people, that weakest link is they can't keep muscle mass. So we have to adapt and improve muscle mass. And what happens is when you have muscle mass that's improved, you then have a higher basic metabolic rate, which means you don't have the issues of putting on weight when you eat the same food, because you have a basal metabolic rate. Really obvious when you think about it, but sometimes not so obvious when you're in the middle of everything. And so the success that we've done is through achieving a structured layered procedure, which is using customized interventions, whether it be a diet, peptides, hugs. They're not hugs as in hugging you. We call it hugs, HUGS, which stands for hips, upper body, glutes, and shoulders. But it's a superset of exercises designed to increase your metabolic rate, improve muscle flow, relax your system, and it's sort of tailored for each different person. Just looking at the few of you on the screen here now, you'd all have a slightly different structure and procedure. And then the other thing we do is supplements. Now, supplements is the least of our concerns, although obviously that's the one that people like to use because they can sell you more stuff. So what we've discovered in the year that we've been going on from this is that we've had great results in mental health, in physical ability, of reduced blood pressure, reduced heart rate issues, better sleep, better appetite suppression, and better appetite reduction of appetite loss, and reduction of appetite, suppressing excessive appetite. Also, we've had fewer illnesses. Now, again, very small sample sizes, but what's been very telling about this is that what we're doing is working, and it's working very well. And what's come from that is that we have really started to work on two things that have come out of this, which is, one is the peptides. So we're looking at a series of peptides that we can apply to improving skin issues, improving blood, skin issues, improving joint and exercise issues, as well as the effects of emotions have on the biomarkers of aging, which we call Freudenspanne. So that's been very good results so far. I did have a presentation ready for you today, but unfortunately I had a little bit of an issue this morning. So I can't send that through to you at the moment. But what we can say, though, is that we've had some very good results whereby we've had one candidate. She has lost over 30% body weight, body fat rather. The skin itself has tightened up, where she's lost sort of the hanging skin. She is now emotionally, her estradiol rates have gone up, her estrogen and progesterone. She has a lower FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. She has lower cortisol levels. And all of these factors have improved it to the point where she is considering having a child at the age of 59 years old, for the first time. But what we had to do was really look at the effect with her own eggs. But the effects of what we're looking at is getting her what we call the somatic messengers of the endocrine system to improve the reproductive systems of the body. And that is something that we have seen now works. In terms of bang for your buck, it is by far the best thing that we can do. And what's interesting is, instead of it costing, as I said, a $20,000 procedure, this can all be achieved for about $3,000, which is a pretty good reduction for that functionality improvement. And I think one of the things as well that's not really been talked about is that if a woman goes through menopause 5 years later than average, she can live an extra 13% of her lifespan, which in American terms is about 11 years. So for every year that she lives, she has a fertility functionality or endocrine functionality, she will have an extra 2.1 years of life. So as it stands at the moment, if we can delay or menopause or reverse perimenopausal women, which we can with these procedures alone, and then we can apply the stem cells at the appropriate time when it's needed, because not everyone goes through menopause at the same time. But say, for instance, we were to then we can re-up it every 3 years. If we could give an extra 10 years of reproductive function, that would give a woman an extra 22 years of life. And then that increases because the effect of the quality of that life is far, far greater. And then what then happens is the knock-on effects is, if you have 22 years of being a functional 45-year-old, you're suddenly pushing 70 before you start getting the effects of aging that you had when you start at 50. And That is huge, because that what it allows us to do is it gives us enough time for us to then work out what other scientists are doing about extending that leasehold on the land, that rights to the land. So what we can do is probably we're looking at a 25% increase of lifespan, but with the functionality of a 40-year-old. And that is where we are. And we, in this year to date, we've had some exceptionally good results. And most importantly, members of that second group are willing to go on camera for it. Finally, they're willing to talk about it, because it's one thing me saying it, there's nothing me showing you pieces of paper, and there's another thing actually seeing real live testimonials. So that's great. And then the second thing that's really happened that's very good is that we have a clinic that will be opening in the North American continent, which is a very, very big thing for us. It's been a long time in coming. That should be open by January of next year, which is not far away. We're in final talks. We have the surgeons, we have the functionality, the capabilities, and we have the research institutes available, which means that people in North America, and by that I mean Canada, Caribbean, United States, and Mexico, will be able to go to this place that's not a 10-hour flight and a 9-hour time difference, and have these procedures and on an outpatient procedure, which will be far more cost effective for them. So that's really where we are at the moment and what we've done to date. We have more stuff in the pipeline, but I think it's pretty good for the last year. And as you know, I've been speaking at a couple of conferences about it. I will be speaking about it at a biohackers conference later this year and next year. I don't like the BH term, but there we go. But it's about knowing thyself. And we have a series of products that we will be able to offer to your audience at a very, very reduced rate. I mean, something that the cost of health, and that could have a significant difference to you. And remember, it's all tailored to that person. It's not tailored. It's not like, hey, buy some pills and here you go and this is good. It's tailored to them, and it's a moving target. And this is the thing that I think people need to understand, is that if you want to have quality longevity, you have to adapt your way of MO, your modus operandi, on a regular basis. It's not always the same thing. Fitness is about adaptability. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell, really, and what we've done to date. And not really much more to say, apart from I'll ask questions and people have questions, because I think it's much more interesting to have Q&As than to talk about how great we are.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Zack, for those opening remarks. And indeed, much of what you said is highly promising. We have some feedback from our audience. Susan Cutforth writes that she met Zack at the recent RadFest in Anaheim in early September. And Zack, Susan believes you're an amazing person, and she's looking forward to hearing you speak today. And then Jason also says that Zack is a cool guy, and Bruce, with regard to the overview that you gave, believes this is awesome in terms of the potential it presents for helping patients lead lives of extended, healthy longevity. So I wanted to ask you, Zack, to elaborate on the concept of Freudenspanne, and also the idea that you put forward that with these treatments or some future iteration of these treatments, it might be possible for people to have 50-year adult lifespans with a 5-year break in between.
Okay, there's 3 questions there, but thanks for that, Gennady. I'll do the first one. So Freudenspanne is, we talk about lifespan and we talk about health span. And lifespan is the number of years you live, and health span is the number of quality, healthy years you live. Well, one of the things I think that we've discovered is that we're not machines. We're human beings, and to play the game, you've got to know the rules of the game, and we're designed a certain way, and those designs involve emotions. So something that brought home to me at a very young age was my grandfather, who died at a very young age. He wasn't that young, but he was 76. But comparatively to being a family of long livers, it was a shock to the system. And his two brothers, well, one is still alive at over 100 years old now, and the other one died in his 90s. And I couldn't work out why he died so young until I discovered after his death, he died of fundamentally a broken heart. Something very bad had happened in the family that I discovered, and he was heartbroken by it. Now, that started me pulling the chain of what does that mean. But the problem with when you say how you feel and your emotions, it becomes like wishy-washy, and it becomes like we could see someone die in a car accident, and you could be, oh, that's great because that person ran my brother over, and I could be devastated because that person saved my brother. And so, but our emotions are valid from both points of view. So you have to apply the effects the emotions have on the biomarkers of aging. So what we've done is we've taken it very simply. With something like aging, what are the effects of aging? Joint issues, inflammation, which is the age accelerator. You're talking about things like eyesight goes, emotional issues in terms of like a brain fog rather than emotional brain fog, which is harder to determine, but you can do it. Skin aging. So one of the classic ones is people's hair that goes, people whose hair goes white overnight. And why does that happen? I mean, maybe it's not quite so overnight. I mean, I personally have gone through something myself where my hair almost fell out in under a great deal of stress about 3 years ago. Well, as you can clearly see, it's not falling out. And so what happened with that? And I couldn't understand what caused it. When we discovered that the way that your mind and your system react to a certain traumatic event can actually age you. It can also keep you young, but it can age you. And so what we're doing is we're taking significant straight lines of what that is. So we don't have every answer. We're just applying Freudenspanne in terms of reproductive systems. And the technical term is I'm actually going to have to read this to get it right, because I wrote this out specifically for that, is to reignite the somatic messengers of the endocrine system related to the reproductive centers of the body. And that is, when you're feeling stressed, you produce cortisol. That's a pretty standard one. But cortisol creates inflammation. Inflammation creates, you can actually have one of our people that we're working with is telling me how he's getting a form of arthritis from this, which is, it's almost crazy to think about. And you have to take it easy and rest and relax. Well, it's all great saying take it easy, rest and relax, but we've got to give you quantifiable numbers, not just some wishy-washy stuff. And so that's where Freudenspanne is about. And it's something we've created. We'd love anyone to add on to it. I mean, we're putting it out there to a number of people because although we created it, we don't feel that we have full 100% rights to it. But it's more that we're applying that principle to everything that we do. And so we found that by applying that principle, we have a lot more efficiency. So a prime example, someone comes to us and says, I want to have children. Well, great. You want to have children. Why do you want to have children? Oh, because I feel I must have children because that's what I'm meant to do. Well, why? So we always get them to question themselves first, not because we're trying to make them doubt themselves, but to ask them, why are they really doing something? Why are you really trying to be this person? Is it because what mommy and daddy want you to do, or your husband or your wife or whatever want you to do? Or is it because it's something that makes sense to you? And these things are very important. So Freudenspanne means that the joy span, I think, is the best translation, right? Is what we did. But it's not just about joy, it's about joy and pain. And it's understanding that the emotions drive us there, and we're not a machine. They will eventually, if we want to go full robot, then we will lose those. But at the moment, this is how we're designed, and you have to expect that. So that is the first thing with Freudenspanne. Can you repeat the second question again? Sorry, I lost that.
Yes, the second question is with regard to the idea that these treatments, or at least a future generation of these treatments, would enable patients to lead 2 50-year adult lifespans with a 5-year break in between.
Okay, right, great. So, okay, so let's take 125 years, right? So the reason why we take 125 years is because approximately that's how long your telomeres last on the DNA. Now we can shorten it, lengthen it. As we know, there's people on this team that know a lot about this, a lot more than I do. But let's just take that as a given, 125. So you become a grown-up approximately at 20 years old. So the idea being is you just take 50 years of being, so from 20 to 70, and then you can reposition your life again at 75, and you can have another 50 years of a second life. So why is that important? Well, if you can have a 50-year fulfilling life, you could have family, a career, children, you can do whatever you wanted to do in that period. And at the end of that period of time, you've got a second bite of the cherry without having to go through all of the insecurities of your 20s. But the thing with that is that to do that, if you know that you have the leasehold to your land, you know you have 125 years. So we know we have that. But that's your DNA. That's not your joints. I mean, are you going to need hip replacements? Are your teeth going to fall out? Is your eyesight going to go? Are you going to have bone structural issues, which means you can't exercise, so your emotions get into a brain fog, and then you develop early onset Alzheimer's, et cetera, Without getting really technical into it, one of the things that's been found is that when you have a fully functioning reproductive system, it actually improves cognitive and brain function. Doesn't reverse genetically related Alzheimer's, but it improves it and or delays it. And so that's a fact. And of course, there are genetic predispositions amongst certain groups for things like that, and that's not our special area. But what we are doing is allowing the most fundamentally base foundation that would allow you to improve that. I mean, one of the things, as you know, is I'm deciding to run a marathon, kind of thing, right? Well, maybe that's a midlife crisis, who knows? But the thing is that it fundamentally, the ability to do that gives you a sense of purpose. And so we believe that we can get the first set to 75, and you have the functionality of a fit 40-year-old. Now, again, I had a couple of people I wanted to bring on, will come on board, who are in their early to mid 60s, who you would not in a million years, no pun intended, believe that they are a day over 42. Literally, they are so fit and healthy, and without surgery. I mean, without Botox and plastic surgery. So the first stage is to get to that first 50-year block, which most people from the age of 35 plus should be thinking about, right? And the next stage is to get to the second level. Now, of course, we're only 3 years into this project, or 4 years into this project, so we're still at early doors. But the results so far have been phenomenal. When you see, as I said, one of our candidates, 59 years old, with pins in her ankles, right? So she can't even do a lot of the exercises. We've had to adapt things whereby we can actually get her to look 5-6 years younger and feel and act 5-6 years younger, go off medication, and that's purely because of what we're structuring. And those procedures, again, a lot of that is exercise routines, mental health. Yes, there are some supplements, but the whole cost to her as a person is significantly lower. I mean, we're talking $2,000 or $3,000 of cost per annum, which is very low when you think about it, for what she's getting for her life quality. So that's our plan. We're not trying to make you live for 1 million years or put you into a sort of communal sort of biosphere of species knowledge. That's above my pay grade. I'm just a simple guy. We just keep it simple. and we keep it that we can maximize that 125 years. And the reason why you want a 5-year break is that we think there might be some significant reconstruction that will be required at the age of 75 to 80. And I don't mean like significant like rebuilding, but almost like rebuilding where you have to almost take a sabbatical and almost rebuild yourself in a very sterile or controlled environment. That's not a fact yet, but that's probably how it's going to be.
This is quite fascinating, and I have long articulated the idea that in an era of indefinite longevity, what is today considered retirement is not going to be permanent. It will be more like a multi-year break where people will reevaluate their lives and perhaps experience more of the world, consider what they want to do next, and after that break, embark upon a new career, a different career from the one that they had completed previously. And it is indeed a highly promising notion that somebody who reaches the age of 70 or 75, instead of retiring in the conventional way, which is essentially saying, I'm done, I'm going to try to enjoy myself while I still can, but know that I'm decaying and I only have so many years left. Instead of thinking about it that way, they do think about retirement as a prelude to a new beginning and likely an entire new career. So it would be interesting to understand, in your vision, would that 70 or 75-year-old essentially look like perhaps a biological 45-year-old would today? Oh, do you think with either existing treatments or treatments that are soon to become available in the future, that might be a possibility, so that we could say have a 75-year-old who looks like you, Zach, and is fit and healthy and able to embark on an entirely new career?
Yeah, but I'm already 71. What are you talking about? No, yeah, exactly right. That's exactly what it's about. Because the thing about aesthetic maintenance is scientists view aesthetics as like vanity. Well, you know what? Vanity is good, because vanity means you take care of yourself. Now, there's obviously extremes of vanity and there's a scale on it. But fundamentally, having a good quality skin is the first barrier to infection. It's the first barrier to preventing issues happening in your body. Having good quality joints is the first barrier to keeping your muscles active. I mean, if you imagine as you age, the ability to produce proteins decreases. So you go from like a filet steak to a ribeye. So you end up with getting all these striations of fat in your body. So you might look the same, but inside your metabolic rate slows down, and then it's a cumulative effect. Oh, wait a minute, I'm eating the same as I did like 2 years ago. Why am I getting fat? And then psychological world. So actually having the effective appearance is very good at keeping what we call, again, the effect, the quantitative effect emotions have on your body into the biological markers of aging. So yes, we envisage it that you would be 75 years old and look like you're 40. That's exactly what it's about. Now, the second phase of so we say 80 to 120, can we still keep you at 40? Or is it going to have a little bit of a little whiff of Kardashian thrown in there? I don't know. But it would be, I don't know yet. It's too early to tell. But we certainly will have the functionality of a fit 40-year-old. I don't know whether you will look that way yet. And so maybe there might be something where you say, oh, okay, they've had their one re-up and that's it. That, you know, you're on your second page. And maybe in the way that you say, if we're going to live to 120, well, maybe you don't grow up until you're 35, you know, because there's a lot more to learn in life. And also there's important things about what you can do, you know, in terms of physicality, as I was saying to you before, at Radfest actually, about how where you can exercise, what your peak levels are different at different parts of your life, and we call that the mosaic. So your ability to learn a language is far greater if you've learned a second language before the age of 9. You're at your strongest in your 40s and 50s, even in some cases 60s, than you are in your 20s and 30s. But your ability to heal is not as good because, as I said before, you're only as strong as your weakest link in the chain. So the idea is that by minimizing, we're attacking all the weakest spots of your body, not your bones, not your nerves. The nerves can last for pretty much 400 years. Your DNA technically lasts if it's fossilized for 250,000 years. I mean, that's fossilized, but still. The thing is, what I'm saying is that, but your skin and your joints fall apart. Well, if you can't walk, how are you going to go to get in your car? You know, how are you going to go and how are you going to do things if you don't have the functionality to express yourself in a corporeal way or physical way? So that's exactly what we mean by aesthetic maintenance. And vanity, I suppose, is another term. I know vanity is not a good, it hasn't got a good connotation, but it's knowing that you are healthy. That's important. So yeah, so we would say that that would be the case. I've seen there's a few questions here. Do you want me to answer these questions?
Yes, let's go to the question from Daniel Tweed, who wonders whether fertility and virility data correlate with longevity for both genders, or has this correlation only been observed for women? You mentioned that for every year that menopause is postponed, a woman would live for 2.2 years longer on average. Is there anything similar in males, given that males have a significantly longer reproductive window to begin with? Is there anything there that can be postponed to achieve a similar longevity effect?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is the nuance of yes. So the reason why it's so clearly defined with women is because menopause, which, by the way, only 4 species that we know of, 5 species have menopause, and all of the other ones are aquatic species. They're dolphins, killer whales, narwhals, I think, and walruses, something like that, or elephant seals, and humans. No other primates do, by the way. So what the reason behind it is, we're not sure, but fundamentally, it's a very clear step. Go through menopause, and you start to age, because what happens is, as you start to age, as you start to go through menopause, the things that keep you fit and strong start to fall away very quickly. Now, with men, it's not such a clearly defined step. There is some data that shows, and this is a very interesting point in this, there's 2 bits of which I will call, what's the word? Can't think of the word now. I'm getting too old. But there's some data whereby super long livers, so over 100 years old, 104, I think is the technical time. More men live over 104 years old than women by a considerable amount in the blue zones, right? Why is that? Well, because I thought men lived less time than women. I thought, what's going on there? Well, there's a number of reasons why we think this is the case. The first case is that men have fewer moving parts. So there's less things to go wrong. But what this does show is something very interestingly, and it could be, again, circumstantial, but in the sense that because men have a longer window of virility or fertility, they therefore live longer when you take out some of the external factors of those that live in the blue zones. So in answer to your question, I don't know, but clearly the longer you are fertile, the better it is. Now with men, what happens is we lose muscle mass in our 60s, 50s and 60s, mostly in our 60s. So you can't keep the muscles. That's why you get the sort of saggy arms and stuff, and you have to exercise. And very interesting, one of our people working with us, he was in his 70s, very fit person who has just had to go through a medical procedure. And literally 3 weeks of doing no exercise, and you saw the muscles waste away on him, which wouldn't happen when he was 30 years old. So that is a slightly different aspect, but it is linked to the endocrine system, and therefore it is linked to reproductivity and virility. It's just how we gauge virility in men is different to how we gauge femininity in women, or vitality in women. Does that answer the question?
Yes. And Daniel is nodding his head as well. And it's a fascinating implication, too, because it seems, based on your answer, that it may be possible for men to maximize their longevity to reach maximum lifespans, at least under the contemporary understanding, that are as long as those of women and perhaps even longer. And it's interesting historically, if one thinks about it, in more primitive societies, men did tend to live longer than women just because childbirth was so dangerous and many women died in childbirth, and that pulled down the average female life expectancy. With the rise of contemporary healthcare and sanitation, doctors washing their hands, those kinds of improvements, female life expectancy skyrocketed because most women survived childbirth. And as a result, now female life expectancy substantially exceeds male life expectancy at all ages. But it seems that what you're saying is in the blue zones, when you take away those extraneous factors that lead men to live shorter lifespans on average, there's not necessarily this kind of gap in life expectancy between males and females. That is to say, females, in your view, are not genetically predetermined to lead somewhat longer lives than males. I'd be interested in a clarification on that.
Absolutely. So yeah, I can clarify that. Okay, number one, let's take a very standard, sort of early industrial or sort of lifestyle. So we base a lot of our stats and our methodology on 19th century techniques, which is nearly, 150 years out, 125 years out. So we're already a century behind. But fundamentally, you have factories, and women start to give birth at, say, 20. Men go out to work in factories. Factories have poisons, toxins. They smoke, they drink. Women don't smoke. Well, some did, but most didn't smoke and drink when they were having children. Even back in the day, it was just known. They had to take care of themselves. What's a very interesting stat is that men are most fertile at the age, with the best quality sperm, at the age of 40 to 45. Whereas women tend to be the most fertile at the age of 20. So why that is, again, it's I don't know all the answers to that, but there seems to be a correlation with the fact that there is the roles of what the genders play in fertility, and also the fact that the lifestyles of men. I mean, men will drink more, smoke more. They have war as well, where they die in war. I mean, one of the reasons, say, for instance, Crete is not in the blue zone, but Icaria is, even though there's mentioned in the blue zone, in the blue zone book, is because a third of the population died in the Second World War, which now they'd all be 100 years old. And so that's an issue. So the statistics are just destroyed. So when you go to the grave, you see there, and being from Crete, I know what I'm talking about. So when you go there, you see that there's a lot of people who die in their very, very late age, and then there's people that die in accidents when they're young, but there's nothing in between, which tells you, but again, you can't statistically, because there's too many variables on that and too much deviation, but it tells you that there is some form of potential, that there is a reason why people die at a certain age. So the answer is, if you keep, in the broader sense of the term, if you keep functionally fertility fit, you will live longer.
Yes, thank you very much. This is fascinating, and I think this is related to a question we have from one of our audience members, Fraser Kirkman, who asks, to a woman in her 30s, what would be your best advice for increasing longevity and for increasing reproductive longevity?
Okay, great question. Okay, so depending on what age in their 30s, but the first thing that you would say to a woman in her early 30s, or any time in their 30s, is is you have to take a very clear look at your diet, exercise, and mental health. And I know it sounds really obvious, but it's like you have to look at that. Doesn't mean you can't drink. It doesn't mean you can't have, you know, other extracurricular fun if you want. It's just knowing your limitations and what you can and can't do. The first thing I would do is take a full baseline breakdown of your metabolic rate, your current state of affairs. For instance, what genetic makeup she is, race, because that does make a difference depending on where you are in the world, and different types of effects that you can have. It affects your blood type, affects your diet that you can eat, so on and so forth. This is what we do. It's exactly what we do. And we break it down. And then you have to implement a regimen that will improve metabolic rate, minimize inflammation, maximize estrogen output, minimize cortisol output. Again, it's somewhat tailored. So it's not a one size fits all. It's a few sizes fit everyone but one in a million kind of thing, right? So that would be the first thing. And also the second thing is then to implement that system in a functional way. So in other words, it's all well and good saying you've got to run 20 miles a day and you've got to only go keto with whatever, some special type of fruit you got to eat, which is ridiculous. It's not practical. No one's going to live like that. So you have to have it so that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. This area is we tailor it so it fits your lifestyle. Now, again, if that person is 300 pounds type 2 diabetic, well, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to lose some weight and get fit, and you can't really just take a pill. But there are many ways to increase that fertility, educate that reproductive longevity. And the first one is to understand your baseline and where you are right now. Once you've got that baseline, you can then go to the next level. And so it might require a lot of exercise, it might require a lot of diet. So diet's an interesting one. So diet it's one of those weird things where if you have a really, really good diet, it's not going to actually help you live that much longer. But if you have a really bad diet, it's going to kill you real quick. So, that sort of stuff's very important. And also understanding the mental aspect. So one of the three things that all the blue zone people have in common, and I'm using the blue zones because I think a lot of people will know about that, is that they have regular moderate exercise, they have a sense of community and purpose, and they believe in something greater than them, whether it's nature, God, whatever it is. They're the three common things. Not diet, not special types of food. I mean, in Costa Rica, they smoke like chimneys. In Greece, they drink alcohol and have loads of sugar. So the best advice would be to find out where you are right now, and then from that to build a lifestyle that is compatible with how you're living now. You might have to make some changes. Like if that woman is smoking 60 cigarettes a day, I would recommend you stop smoking. I mean, that's pretty basic stuff. But fundamentally, that most things are very achievable.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that will be quite a helpful answer to our female audience members.
If they want to, by the way, if someone wants to get in touch with us, they're more than welcome. You can put the link in the page, and they can contact us directly, and we can give them that information.
Yes, indeed. The Austin Biotec website is in the video description, and I've included it here as well. It's austinbiotech.com. I've linked people to the science page, but there are other pages on the website as well, including a contact page. So please do check it out. Now, Jason has some interesting questions about menopause. I will read what he wrote in our private chat. He says, could you say a little more about what exactly menopause is? Is it an effective aging? So would you say that a post-menopause state is fundamentally less healthy than a pre-menopause state? And then he asks, is menopause something that is caused by aging, like the body breaking down, or is it something different, a parallel process, perhaps?
Oh, that's a big question. Good question. Okay, so as I said, there's 5 species that have menopause. All the other ones are aquatic species. They're dolphins, whales, or
yeah. And I'm wondering, really curious, is what you think about that data point. Ain't that weird? I think that's kind of like a really weird data point. That I don't know what's up with that. What do you think about that?
Okay, so there's one interesting point. So on that note is when you look at humans and other primates, so we're supposed to be linked to primates. When you look at the way that our hair grows on our bodies, it actually shows our hair grows in the same way that they have on whales and other marine mammals. So our hair is designed to grow as if we're gliding through water. We're also the only primate that exhibits the dive reflex, which whereby we can shut off parts of our body once we go deep down. Now, obviously, we don't go as deep as a whale. We can't go a mile deep, but there's some people that can go pretty deep and hold their breath for 7 or 8 minutes. I mean, a standard free diver can do 3 or 4 minutes, and that's not too difficult. Which, if you think about it, is enough oxygen starvation for the brain. So the answer to that is I don't know. There's just some things that don't correlate. What I do think menopause is about, and I think this seems to be the case, is that menopause is very, very labor intensive. Again, think of it like a car. It's like you're a muscle car and you're a gas guzzler and you've got these big fat tires and you've got great performance, and that's to sort of get the children, right, kind of thing. But the minute you actually have the kids, you don't need that. So you go to a people carrier, which is small wheels, a small little engine, and it's got big space and it drives around. So you don't need the big wheels. You don't need the V8. You don't need all that sort of anti-lock brakes. You just get rid of them. You shed it. That's the sort of seems to be because there's a lot of energy required for that, huge amount, second only to the brain. Now, the brain obviously is by far the largest user of energy, but after that, it's reproductive organs. The other thing as well is that 5 of the 6 deadliest cancers stem from reproductive organs: ovarian, uterine, prostate, cervical, etc. Breast cancer, of course, is the 5th, which is the most deadly. And so you ask yourself, well, why do you have that? Well, it's because the cells are constantly breaking apart and resealing together. So there's more statistical chance of things going wrong. So menopause could be, and again, I do not know the answer. We don't know the answer. I've done a lot of research on this, and I don't know why. It doesn't sort of make sense in some ways. Menopause could be that it is a scale of excess overhead, trimming down your body's requirements because we live in small groups, and therefore you're giving room for the next generation of children, but you're still passing on the knowledge. But of course, that changes if you're living a lot longer, because then what age do you start to mature, right? So menopause, though, when you start off with children, we're both babies, boy and girl, and we look very similar with a few bits that are like slightly different, but fundamentally, how many times do we look to baby and go, isn't that a lovely girl? No, it's a boy. Isn't that a lovely boy? Oh, it's a girl, right? All the time, right? And then you differentiate. And once we differentiate, women get breasts and hips and certain types of hair, and they could have different, more body fat. Men lose their body fat, they get broader shoulders, deeper voices, facial hair, body hair, whatever it is. So it differentiates us so that we can reproduce again. But that process of reproduction and the ability to carry that for a woman requires bone density to carry the child, requires to have clarity of thought in terms of like keeping the ability to act, to prepare for things like caution. It's an interesting statistic. Men in long-term relationships have much lower testosterone than single men. And when children, then fathers start to become fathers, they start to lose their testosterone even more, hence the increase of the dad bod. But also, they also get the interesting thing whereby they become much more empathic and in tune with themselves. And the frontal lobes of their brains start to expand. This is proven, absolutely. I can send you the links to this if you need. Expand so that they can understand the intricacies of social interaction, which is why they say in the fight game, never have sex before a fight, you lose your legs. Because I never 100% agree in that, but it's sort of true. You feel all loved up and I feel good. I don't want to fight you. I want to make love. And so those things are different. And all these things that happen are designed for us to produce and maintain and bring to fruition those children. Once you get to the point you don't need that, hence we have menopause. And this is the problem. We are still functioning as a caveman or cave person. And society has evolved at a rapid rate in the last 10,000 years, but humanity hasn't. And we're just going at this sort of path like this, and humanity and society's gone like this. I mean, a 15-year-old woman in cave times was a mother. A 15-year-old person now is pedophilia, right? You know, I mean, that's the difference. But are they any different? No, they're not in biological terms, but they are in societal terms. And so menopause is almost a concept, and this is something that's more about the pre-programmed aging. We are designed at some point to switch over to the next level, and we're going to go from fertility fit to mentally fit, or to sort of middle age. And so it's not necessarily the body breaking down, it's the body switching off requirements that it needs for the next stage. But by default, because of that, elements that we regard as vital break down. So if you're living in a smaller community where you have, a prime example is this. If there's a crisis in a room and there's 50 people in a room, and there's chaos, I don't know, the building's on fire, I don't know, something like that. The first thing that people do subconsciously is they look towards one of the biggest males in the room, physically biggest. Now, why is that? Why? Because the big guy's going to be better at organizing. It's because we're designed to think that the big male is going to go and club everyone over the head and beat his chest and do all the stuff that he has to do. We're programmed that way. Whether we like to admit it or not, it's sex and violence. And so that's the reality. So you have to know that game to understand how to improve it. So menopause is not necessarily, it is aging if you argue the point of pre-programmed aging. But whatever it is that causes it, it makes you age faster afterwards. Fact.
Very interesting. And there is a related question from Fraser Kirkman, who wonders, are there differences in optimizing for longevity? And I think here the intended meaning is just total lifespan versus reproductive longevity. So, of course, your work emphasizes the correlation of the two and how by extending reproductive longevity, one extends total longevity. There are some species for which this does not work, like salmon, for example, who die when they reproduce, or certain insects that expire very shortly after they reproduce. So is it the case always for humans that if one does something to extend reproductive longevity, that extends total longevity? Or are there some situations where there is a trade-off?
Okay, great question. Well, at least we're not praying mantises, right? Because then we're all screwed if we're guys. So, or black widows. But yeah, okay. So in point to answer to the salmon, which is very interesting, they don't have a nurturing structure. See, we've got to remember with humans, our brains are significantly larger than anything else that happens. So we went from quadrupedal to bipedal. Our brains are 6 times larger than they should be if you compare it to, say, a primate, which is sort of bipedal but not quite full. Hip sizes have narrowed, and head sizes have enlarged. So now a child is a blob for at least a year before it starts walking. I mean, you know, it's a prodigy if a child can walk at 8 months. 8 months? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So because of that, this goes back to what you're talking about, Gennady, whereby because we live longer, our passages of life of childhood to manhood or to adulthood are changing. Those dynamics change. So in answer to your question, yes, reproductive longevity, barring the possible effects of cancer, and that's a big barring, it's a big but, the longer you have the ability for your endocrine system to somatically affect your body, the longer you're going to live.
Excellent. Well, that is quite promising for our species, and indeed I'm quite glad that we did not evolve from black widows or praying mantises. That would be a highly broken society, to say the least. Now we will go to the next question, which is from Art Ramon, who wonders, does a woman become menopausal after all her eggs are depleted? And would your treatment promote new egg growth, or does menopause happen while eggs are still present? And a related question that he has is, would taking contraception that stops ovulation increase lifespan for women if it prevents the depletion of eggs? So what do you think about those questions?
Okay, that's 3 points. So the first question is, does a woman become menopausal after all eggs are depleted? Her eggs aren't depleted. And this concept that you have a certain number of eggs and then that's it is also incorrect. You can, our treatment does promote new egg growth. That is what phase 2 is about. But again, what we're doing is we're not interfering or changing the fundamental system. What we're doing is we're reigniting the somatic messenger system. And what I mean by that is we are, we're not changing anything. We're just either delaying or reigniting that system. So releasing the effect of releasing the egg will have a lot of therapeutic benefits of keeping you youthful, right? Now, some members of our team, and we've argued at this, and we've gone through hours and hours of to and froing about this. Some people say you have to actually have children to really make it fully effective. Again, that's a very big question to carry on, and I think it's almost too complicated. I think to keep it simple, that for a start, she doesn't become menopausal after her eggs are depleted because she still has eggs in her system even when she's menopausal. Secondly, our treatment does promote new egg growth. It actually takes the stem cells and they will differentiate into a fresh egg. So in other words, menopause does occur while eggs are still present. And that means, why does that happen? What's the point? Why do you have menopause if you still got eggs? I mean that not very efficient. We don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you for those responses. And there's an interesting question from Daniel Tweed with regard to the hallmarks of aging. And there was a 2013 paper that outlined 9 hallmarks of aging. Recently, it's been expanded into 12 hallmarks of aging, or at least 12, in an updated paper by the same authors in 2023 called Hallmarks of Aging, an Expanding Universe. So Daniel wonders, do you think that these hallmarks of aging are well settled attack points for the death of death or the defeat of aging? Or will we have more non-physical parameters included and better researched eventually, such as the will to live? I think what he's wondering is, in addition to these physiological types of aging-related damage that have been classified and categorized and on occasion recategorized, are there emotional parameters that modulate lifespan? And Daniel, you can expand on your question if you would like.
Well, yeah, I mean, some might argue the will to live is a physical phenomenon comes from our brains, and our brains are physical phenomenon. But maybe more broadly, what do you think of they being able to study non-physical phenomenon in terms of healthy longevity?
Like, what do you mean by non-physical? Paranormal? Like what?
Maybe like metaphysical ideas of the soul, or Gnostic theories.
Right. Okay.
Our anime Tom's a big Gnostic. Maybe he could expand on some Gnostic aspects of that.
Okay. So this is one of the issues that we have with science. I don't disagree with what you're saying. There's many of us have had dreams about things that we can't explain, and then suddenly you wake up and this thing has happened, or you think about a friend and all of a sudden that friend is in trouble and you call them up. And a lot of people have this. It's not like that exceptional, but we always say, oh, it's just we call it intuition, we call it whatever we call it. What we've been trying to do is make that a much more simplistic way of quantifying it. So when we say the effect the emotions have on the biomarkers of aging, in many ways, when you look at like the 12 areas of age, the 12 hallmarks of aging, genomic stability, telomeres, etc., a lot of these effects can be driven by how you feel. So you can have huge amounts of chronic inflammation because you're stressing out about something. Oh my God, I've got to do this. And what causes that, right? So that is almost a metaphysical thing. It's like what you're perceiving, that your coffee is, you're given the wrong cup of coffee at Starbucks and you stress out about it. Well, I mean, really, that's stupid, isn't it, really? But it's a metaphysical thing. But how can you quantify it? That's what we want to do. That's partly where we want to go with this. But to start with that, you've got to start off with not looking at the top of the mountain, but looking at the first few paces of getting to that point. So at the moment, we're looking at it from a the 12 hallmarks of aging is a good way to look at it, actually. I mean, I suppose we do that by default. But things like chronic inflammation, things like cell senescence, right? These can be affected by your emotional state. And so what we're trying to do is take one aspect and then build on that, rather than try and have a concept of like you're Tony Stark, you get injured, you go into a cave and you come out and you're Iron Man, right? But it's not quite that simple. And also everyone forgets about the genius that was in there that saved his life at the beginning with the battery, right? So everyone forgets about that bit, right? So in other words, to look at that, we have to take it from one line, and we're just taking this one line to begin with. And we have discovered very clearly, and this is why we want to get some of our candidates on camera, because their emotional state is far, far better. And is that metaphysical? I don't know. And it sounds to me like it's got a bit of metaphysical. They feel better about life. They I don't know if that it is not. Again, it's very telling that a lot of scientific theories came from religious people, like the guy who came up with the Big Bang Theory. I think he was a monk, wasn't he? You know what I mean? It's the stuff like that. So the answer is yes. I think there will be a much greater implication with that, but we have to build that on solid foundations, not just some plucking things out of the air. Because if you pluck it out of the air, even if you get it right, no one's going to believe you, because they're going to go, oh well, that was a lucky guess. And then to a point, they might have some truth with that. So
yeah, and to be fair, science defines repeatability, and independent checking as part of its rules set. So you're never going to be able to prove these non-repeatable things.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the answer is that yes, we believe that the way that we should be viewing metaphysical things or emotional aspects is much on a much more quantifiable basis. It doesn't have to be purely very rigid, but we have to build it on solid foundation. So the answer is yes, there will be more, but not right now.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm curious, Zack, when do you think you will have some videos of your patients available? Because I do think that will intrigue our audience to see some of these people, and in terms of their appearance, in terms of their behavior, in terms of their attitudes, have them demonstrate their youthfulness.
Right. Great question. So I've had a verbal agreement. That doesn't mean we're getting them to agree to it, because this is a privacy thing for a lot of people. They don't want to be out on the camera. So I'm hoping well, certainly if you invite me back next year this time, I should have something by then. But right in the next few weeks, unlikely. But we should have something within about a year from now that we will be able to get it down and have it, repeatable, as you say, Dan. Be able to show this is a before, this is an after. We have different areas of things that we can look at. But yeah, about a year from now.
All right, thank you, and we look forward to that. And before we address more audience questions, I want to ask Tom Ross, our Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy and 2024 U.S. presidential candidate, if he has any questions or comments on what has already been stated.
Well, yeah, picking up on what Daniel was just saying about, me being a Gnostic and whatnot. And, and I think it also goes to the emotional state that is a very key way of staying young. It's almost a placebo effect. When I see the world as a simulation, that has given me a new purpose. It's really kept my apathy at bay at this age. And so when I see this world as a simulation, as a game, and I see myself as an avatar, it gives me a lot more courage to do and say things, like running for president. That's the game I'm playing right now. And so Gnosticism is really the gameplay I've chosen. It's I think we all come down here with different. Some people want to play Farmville, some people want to have a more exciting adventure game. And so Gnosticism is the gameplay I've chosen. And, so I have a villain to fight against, the Demiurge and the Archon, and that's kind of one way I stay young. It really keeps my apathy at bay. And that's been a real problem for me for years, is just not giving a shit, about anything anymore. But when I see myself as an avatar in a simulation, it's given me courage. It's really kind of increased my interest in this realm. And so that's one way I'm staying young, I think. And so, yeah, it's just picking up on that idea. And that was something Zach was saying earlier. It's really important, the emotional state you're in, or, what keeps you young in that way.
So just to ask that question, Tom. So when you say you're a Gnostic, are you like a Gnostic in the sense of like the secret knowledge Gnosticism, or it's about attaining enlightenment through knowledge?
Well, yeah, it's about attaining divine knowledge through knowledge. The gnosis means knowledge, So, and Gnosticism and Hermeticism, they're all about becoming more human. And there's, when in this gameplay that I'm playing, the Demiurge and the Archon are trying to mechanize us and keep us and snuff out our divine spark. At least that's the gameplay I'm playing. And so going into the secret knowledges, going into the Hermetics and all those principles and understanding what's happening is one way to become more human. It's one to unveil our divine spark more. So, yeah.
It's interesting how you use lots of Greek words, archon, gnosis, and all that stuff. I feel that we, interesting. It's good to know you still use the old Greek words. So, I agree with that. I mean, life is a game. It is a game, and gaming is life. And I think there is a very interesting point about, what drives us forward, and that you could argue it could be a product of your intelligence. And what's the point of it all? What's the point in making money? What's the point in doing this? Well, who gives a damn? We're going to be dead in 50 years, 100 years anyway. Who cares, right? There's a lot to do with that. It could be just make hay while the sun shines. And a lot of that's your viewpoint. I think, though, one of the things that's very telling about what we're going through now is that I think you have to work with what you have at this moment in time. Like when you say, well, I've lost the motivation, I'm pretty sure that you've never known what it feels like to not knowing you're going to have food on the table the next day and you have to feed your family. I don't know. Right? I don't know.
I've been in those situations when I was younger. That's why I don't get worried about money, because I know how, when I'm alone, how I can make money. I was in Europe and I had no money, and so I was able to play guitar in the streets. In Germany and Hamburg specifically is a whole different vibe when you're a street musician. They have a whole street set aside, so it's a whole business model there. But I know what I can do when I'm homeless, and so I don't get worried about money. But yeah.
Well, what I mean is like it's very interesting. Most of us here, even if we're not particularly wealthy, or if we are, who knows? But that we have a sense of, we have opportunities available to us, which you don't have if you're living in the ghetto of Manila and you're going to be crushed and you're basically going to either have to sell yourself or be sold into something. And so the only escape is to get high on some drug, right? That's no hope at all, which we don't have. And that's a luxury that we have. And I think we have to acknowledge that. But yeah, I do believe that a lot of understanding ourselves and being able to know thyself and know your strengths and weaknesses is a very important way of moving forward, because you're building it on a foundational support structure. And the people that I find the most inspirational are generally not those that live in academia or in the higher levels of what we do regard as the intelligentsia. I find I get the most inspiration in the trenches. Yeah, because they're really living it. They're not just thinking about it; they're doing it. And you sort of, and then we have the luxury of education, maybe, or knowledge, maybe, which allows us to apply that or what they're doing in different ways. So, you know, that gets a lot more complicated when you start putting stuff like that together. It's way more complicated. Above my pay grade there. You know? I'm not running for president, so I couldn't do that.
Yeah, well, I feel silly when I start to get depressed or I start to get apathetic, because I look around and I realize people are really having some real struggles. And so that keeps me sane, keeps me working forward, you know, for other things, working to help them in some way.
But one thing I will say this, though, is some of your apathy and some of your sort of listlessness is actually physical. It's not metaphysical. It's actually a physical thing, a reduction in testosterone, a different type of way that your body reacts to certain types of issues. You could have certain foods. I mean, we looked at something whereby, you know, everyone talks about serotonin in build or psilocybin, so on and so forth. There's some people I've been speaking with who have ways of maybe creating your gut biome that would give you serotonin in your system without destroying your system. I mean, that'd be genius. You know, you have some food and you're getting high, right? You know, and it's like, wow. So there are physical expressions that will have, there are physical conditions that will have metaphysical expressions. And that's very, very important to know, because some things are, and they can become like, and this is what we're trying to look at, is there a way that these things can actually have a circle where they repeat themselves again and again and again? Or can you break that cycle? Why is it that you get depressed about a certain thing and you have to break that cycle? And some of that is physical. It's a habit. If you make your bed every morning and go for a run every morning, you're going to lose weight, kind of thing. I don't know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always said it's very important. If you want to break a habit, if you want to stop smoking, if you want to stop drinking, you have to change your environment. You can do it cold turkey for a while, but that environment will start to get you back into that rhythm.
Yeah, it will. And if it doesn't, it will feel like it will. Yeah. So it's very interesting. I mean, did you smoke? Have you ever smoked?
Yeah, years ago. I stopped a long time ago.
And how did you stop?
Well, I started taking the patch. That helped. And then it took me a while to get off that patch, but eventually I did.
And then what happened?
Then I got really tired. Whenever I wasn't using the patch, I would get really tired. And I talked to my doctor about that, and he prescribed me a low dose kind of Adderall thing so I wouldn't fall asleep. Because I was really busy at the time. I had to work all the time, and I couldn't afford to be tired or spend any downtime. So.
And then what happened after? So you went from nicotine to speed, and then what happened after speed?
Nothing.
Right.
Kind of off of that. Yeah. Adderall didn't work for me. It's not something that really works with my metabolism, I guess. But.
Right. That's very interesting. So I agree with you. When you stop smoking, some people go through that. Some people do cold turkey, but a lot of it is your environment. So interestingly enough, I used to smoke, and I just one day decided to stop. And because I could physically do a lot of my exercise while smoking, I realized that I couldn't keep doing the exercise I used to do. So I got into like a type of yoga, and I'm not particularly yoga friendly or anything. It just was like a hot yoga. And I did this because I didn't want to put on weight and I wanted to break the habit. And 30 days, I just stopped one day, and after 90 days, that was just sort of it. I just never I don't mind people smoking around me. I just never want to smoke again. And I think you're right. You rewire your brain and you rewire it. But that has to be a circumstantial area. I didn't go through the patchy thing, but I understand that concept because one of the things I discovered is that why you start a habit isn't always the reason you think you start that habit. And anyone above the age of 35 or 40 probably is smoking was still quite cool when you were a kid, which does have an effect.
Well, yeah, I was a competitive swimmer all my childhood, and I would never smoke, And then I went to college, and I had a director's class, or I was invited to participate in this director's class. He did a scene from A Death of a Salesman, and he wanted to do naturalistic theater. And so my character, Hap Lohman, had to smoke. And so I would put, Virginia Slim lights in a Marlboro pack, but then you start doing cast parties, and eventually you just start picking up the habit, and then I started from that point on. So
exactly. That's very interesting. So yeah, I think that's exactly it. And one of the things that we do with our candidates is we break down what their daily lifestyle routine is, how they eat, when they eat. One of us would say, but I eat organic peanut butter sandwiches. Right. Okay. It's organic. Yeah. Right. It's
on white bread.
Yeah, but it's that kind of thing. So it's sort of understanding what they and break down their aspects of their life and how they change those. And a lot of this stuff it's very easy. You were a competitive swimmer, so I'm sure you're a great swimmer still, right? But if you want to get good at swimming again, you're going to have someone coach you because they can see from the outside where you're going wrong and where you're going right, which you can't do from the inside. And everyone needs a coach. Everyone needs a help. And that's what we provide. And then the idea then is that we're getting the community together so that they can speak to themselves once they've gone through it. And it's not like anyone can join it. If you've gone through it, it's very personal. And if they want to, and we're starting to get traction on that now, but that's sort of something that we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
I see some more questions are on here. Do you want me to answer these as well?
Yes, we will go to some questions. First, I wanted to say this was a fascinating interdisciplinary conversation, the kind that we seek to cultivate in our virtual enlightenment salons, because this conversation connected the physical, the emotional, the metaphysical in a very interesting way. Our friend John H. also writes that, speaking of Greek words, he tries to obtain and maintain states of aponia and ataraxia, and he considers the ancient Greek philosophers, the Stoics and Epicureans, to have really thoroughly considered this living wisely thing. Aponia is the absence of bodily pain, and ataraxia is tranquility and freedom from fear. So I do suppose having those states of experience would maximize Freudenspanne.
Actually, I've got a question on that. So I've discussed this. So I believe that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference, right? So the opposite of joy is not pain. The opposite of joy is nothing. It's emptiness. So aponia, right? Having ataraxia is like no pain at all. You need a bit of emotion, you need a bit of trauma, a bit of pain to understand joy. So for me, I'm a little bit old school in that sense of I like a bit of joy and pain, mixing it up. It's just understanding that balance that you can work with. And that's, everyone is slightly different with that. So I mean, would I rather have a life of no high because I don't have a low? Absolutely not. Give me both. It's a question of getting those together in a way that works for your system and your pulse that works. So I noticed someone was talking about genetic ancestor memory on this question, which I was wondering if I could jump to that one, if that's okay.
Yes. So this is from Daniel Tweed, and he wonders, do you think genetic ancestor memory or even recent ancestor effects come into play? And he writes that his father grew up in the Great Depression, and he thinks that maybe that has translated some sort of hoarding or overeating behaviors to Daniel himself. So what do you think about that hypothesis?
Absolutely, 100%. Now, how and to what level? It's a bit like going Lamarckian over Darwinian, right? Well, now it's been proven that maybe Lamarck's theories aren't that wrong. So yes, I believe in that. So what's an interest? Now this is a very interesting statistic. If you go through starvation, your children, their height will be affected by the fact that you went through starvation. Well, hold on a minute. How's that possible if you weren't even pregnant with the child? So there is clearly an epigenetic expression that goes into the genes. Now, to what depth and level, I'm not sure. And how much of that, did you know your dad very well?
Well, he died of cancer when I was like 22, but yeah, we were pretty close. You know,
So
he was nice.
he therefore gave you your formative years. He was the person that instructed you and stuff. So in that sense, perhaps that makes you a hoarder and overeater. It's because he says, listen, you know, I went through this. I couldn't eat the next day. You got to save. You got to keep it together, and you keep the stuff together. And therefore, there's this feast or famine mentality, and you therefore feast or famine. But in an age of plenty, you put on weight. So is that genetic, or is that the fact that you've been shown that because culturally was shown as you were a child? So the answer to that is that isn't genetic ancestor memory. That is more like lifestyle training by your parental parent. But there is a genetic memory about things like starvation, and it does affect the next generation. There is also an interesting concept, which is, you know, if you can, some people who can trace their family very far back, and they have a very clear line of, say, academics, or a very clear line of warriors, or a very clear line of bandits, whatever it is, right? And so you find that these people display certain signs, and therefore that's why they're good at certain sports or certain jobs or certain whatever it is. So there is that. The level to which I can prove it, I'm not so sure I can do that 100%, but I certainly believe in it. And there is a very clear evidence to show that, but not in full studies as far as I'm aware.
It almost might be a basis for why astrology seems to work, because people born on the same day, you know, the planets are oriented the same way, the universe is in the same kind of orientation. You know, this can never be settled science because it's anecdotal. It's not going to sit still for laboratory clinic analysis. But yeah, I think there's patterns all around us that we haven't applied scientific rigor to yet.
Yeah, we know nothing about. Absolutely.
So our friend Alan Crowley introduces another Greek term, eudaimonia, which was used by Aristotle to essentially describe a state of happiness that arises from fulfilling one's potential. So it's not range of the moment happiness. It's not a sensation of pleasure in the immediate moment. It's more of a sense of fulfillment, a lifelong kind of sense of having actualized one's purpose. And I do wonder if you think that relates to Freudenspanne.
So repeat that again. Sorry, I did say that again.
So the concept of eudaimonia, as formulated by Aristotle, a kind of lasting sense of fulfillment from having actualized one's potential, could that contribute to the vision of Freudenspanne that you've outlined?
Okay, if we're going to get to philosophy, I'm more of a Diogenes kind of guy. Okay, so if you want the truth on this, and he was the one that, you know, told Alexander the Great not to disturb his bath. You know, I believe that a lot of these things in that area is about how to that. So who was the person who said that? What was it? Alan? Was it Alan?
Alan, yes.
So whatever Alan said, that's important to him, and so therefore, from that point of view, that sense of fulfillment, if that's important to him, then that is part of his Freudenspanne. If it's important to someone else that they don't give a damn what anyone else thinks and they just do it for themselves, that's part of their Freudenspanne. So this is what we're talking about. It is a very broad term that we've applied to one small area. And we think it has more, we'd love to have more input on that. But obviously, we want to focus on that area. But that sense of fulfillment, yeah, I think that's important to all but the hardest of all of the most deepest of cynics, you know. So yeah, I think that we do have a sense of wanting to achieve something, whether it's work or family or play or ego or whatever it is. I think it is important.
Yes, indeed. So Alan also wonders about perhaps being able to get a tour of your facility. And I think it would be good for you, Zack, to clarify the significance of the name Austin Biotec, because Alan is himself in Texas and he would have the ability to visit Austin, the city, but I understand the situation with the name versus the location of the facility is a bit more complex than that. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could go to the clinic in Austin. The only thing is that that clinic doesn't do all the procedures that you want to do. Most of the procedures are done either in Europe, where you'd have to go to Greece or Serbia, or they will be done in North America. When I say North America, it will probably be in Mexico. It won't be in Austin because we cannot get all of the stem cell procedures done in Austin that we want to do due to FDA issues, which is not really the conversation we're going to have today. But it means that we can't do certain autologous stem cell procedures until we have enough data for the FDA to pass it. So I don't know where you are in Texas. If you're near the border, that might be easier for you just to go across the wall and go that way, if you want to do that. But I'm very happy to talk to you about that offline if you want.
All right. Thank you very much, Zack. And now we also have an interesting set of questions from Ben Bolweg, who is our Director of Longevity Outreach. He couldn't make it to the live stream today, but he is wondering what is next on the path to approval for any treatments that you would need approval for, and what step are you dreading the most, or what step are you the most excited for?
Ooh, great questions. Okay, so when you mean approval, you're talking about approval for a procedure in the United States. So the next step is for us to get an IRB that is fully functioning through an academic institution, not a private institution, which we're working on at the moment, so that we can start to say that we have the credibility of an institution behind us. And the one I'm dreading the most is the insurance issue. So the problem is that we can show that you will live longer, and therefore your cost to society will be less, i.e., in terms of money costs. But for us to get that done, we have to have a certain number of people doing this over a certain number of states so we can have the actuarial numbers. And that is going to be a huge amount of work. And the other problem is that what our procedure does is it takes away the need for you to take certain drugs, which isn't very beneficial to the powers that be. And that is difficult. We've had a lot of issues with that in the last 2 years. So that's one of the reasons why we don't have a full, in answer to Alan's question, a full clinic up in Austin. It's just that the first surgeons that were doing stuff were based in Austin, so we called it Austin Biotec. So that was the reason. What am I most excited for? Well, what I'm most excited for is we have a great opportunity in this generation, us nomads, if you want to take the sort of that sort of generational divide of what we are. I think we're all nomads, of Gen Xers and some of the millennials. Is that there is a confluence of technology, awareness, and desire at the same time that would allow us to get this information out to people, and they would have a meaningful change to their lives, which would then create a groundswell of people saying, hey, this really works. And so, you know, how could we have reached 100 million people without going through traditional media 30 years ago? Not possible. Whereas now you have some YouTubers who have 100 million followers. I don't know however many they got. They got millions of followers. Right? So, you know, that is fantastic. And I think that that's the most exciting thing. And what we're doing is we've now got the pieces in place of our procedures. So we have the analysis structure in place. We have an exercise or system of routine that's in place. We have peptide chemical processes or procedures that will reverse or change or delay certain processes in your body in place. And we have an end of the solution, which is the stem cell procedures that are in place. And so now what we now need to do is get more data. And once that data comes out, and once we prove our facts, like, you know, as I said, like, I think last year, we thought that supplements was going to be what it was all about. It was all about supplements. We realized supplements account for nothing. Waste of time, most of it. I mean, it's like the certain people that promote the sale of NMN and then get it fed. You know, you have to get it on paid for by a prescription. You know, it sort of, you need it, but there's other ways around it. So I'm most excited for the fact that there is an open source amount of data that once we can get this in place with enough people and they will see that it works, we don't need to worry about approval for anything, because we've got approval, because you have the right to do what you want with your own body, right? No one can stop that yet. So if we can show a very meaningful way, we will have enough of a groundswell to make that work. So that's what's the most exciting, but it's also the most difficult to quantify, and it's the hardest way to make your living, but that's life.
Yes, but it's a very genuine approach in that it focuses on what is actually likely to be effective rather than what's going to sell more in the immediate present. But Ben was actually wondering about your thoughts on NMN, and you seemed in your response to be a bit skeptical about the somewhat widespread practice now of supplementing with NMN. So what are your thoughts on this? Does it work to some extent, or do you think it's entirely futile?
Okay, in between the two questions, between those 2 points. So we used to use a lot of beta NMN with our candidates, and we discovered, again, on a very small sample size, you know, not more than 300 people that were in that group, because obviously, depending on which procedure you do, there's different sample sizes of people. We found that only about 40% showed any improvement with any form of nicotinamide, whether it's NR, NMN, NAD+, whatever you want to call it. Or, you know, if I was to be personal preference, that probably would be NR, probably. Again, that's a personal preference. It doesn't really have much effect on me personally, actually. I don't find it does anything for me. You know, if I want to get some vitamin B, I'll just have some Vegemite. So in the sense, I think a lot of what this is it feels to me, and again, I'll be careful, I'm live on the internet with this, but it feels to me that certain people have built it up. So you go, oh yeah, it's great. And then all of a sudden you have to pay a lot more for it. And that's exactly what we're not about. We are not about that at all. We're about, yes, we have to make a living. Yes, we have to, you know, pay the rent, as it were. But it's more about offering a product that is, we're about longevity. We're not about short-term to 90-day return on the corporate bank balance. We're talking about long lifespan. So we're in it for the long haul. So we would like it to be something that's long-term. So my feeling about NMN is, yes, it works. It's for some people, doesn't work for everyone. There are other areas you can energize yourself, because it's really about giving yourself cellular energy. Well, maybe you could just take one of these nootropics with ATP in it. I don't know. I mean, maybe that has the same effect. I'm not saying it's bad for you. And there are some people in the group that swear by NMN, and it works brilliantly. And if they don't have it, they lack energy. So again, it's not a one size fits all, and it never was and never will be. It's a few sizes fit nearly everyone. That's basically what it is, and NMN is one of those sizes.
And this just further emphasizes the importance of a personalized longevity and health regimen where each individual will discover what works best for them. And it seems NMN could be a part of the regimen for some people, but one really has to be careful to make sure that it is effective in one's own situation. Now, Didier Kernel, our friend from AFT Techno Prague in Belgium and France, writes that the statistic you presented regarding the ability to get more than 2 years of life extension for an extra year of fertility for women is quite an interesting datum. But do you have any references for this?
I do, and I do actually have the references for. I'm just going to pull up the paper for you, but I do have the references, Didier. Yeah.
All right.
So you have to wait whilst they get it, though. Okay.
Yes, we will share this in the YouTube chat once we get the reference, and we will also try to share it on screen. In the meantime, let's hear some feedback from Art Ramon on what has been said thus far.
Yeah, just it sounds like a good plan that you're doing. Yeah, don't really have a question. Just the observation that no, actually, I don't have an observation. Sorry, brain's not here today.
All right, Daniel, then.
Oh, well, I would just type it in the other chat that I like, Zach, that you're doing this kind of poor man's guide to longevity. Like it's kind of like, if you got this budget to work with, here are the top 10 things you can do. If you got the next level of budget, here's what you could do.
Yeah,
with
exactly right.
Budget level, yeah. And you don't find that very often in the longevity advice community. So, yay, go Zach.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. This is a great way to broaden the reach of the longevity field and give people a clear understanding that this is for everyone, that there are changes that anyone is capable of making to increase healthy longevity. And Tom, do you have any comments regarding the salon thus far? This is kind of our set of closing remarks as well, even though we have 12 minutes, because there will be some more questions to address.
Yeah, no, this is all fascinating to me. And you're right. It was a very kind of wide-ranging conversation, and that's what we want to have on these salons. But a lot of people think that a longevity science and any technologies that will enhance us will be related to just the elite, the people who can afford these things. And so I think your approach is really answering a lot of that question. It's you can, like Daniel was saying, it's the poor man's version of longevity. And I think I earlier put into Chat GPT, how do we make this, what's a good statement to quell people's fears that this will only be available to the wealthy? And it came up with a good slogan. I won't read it now, but that's the kind of thing we need to work with AI on, is answering these questions. How do we make this affordable to everybody, and not just, and so, I always say it's like having Einstein in your high school physics class and not cheating off of his paper. When we're not asking AI how to answer some of these questions, we are not using AI the way it's supposed to be used. And so, yeah, this is a great way for people to get their heads around longevity in general. And that's something I need to do more of. But yeah, this is a great solution, and I look forward to learning more about it.
Okay, I have one of the papers. It's a bunch of papers on this. Okay, this one is from this one's the Journal of Women's Health. It's premature menopause and all-cause mortality and lifespan amongst older women than 40 years in the NHANES1 epidemiology follow-up study. And what it basically tells you is if you go through menopause at a certain age, it has an equivalent of 10.8-year difference. But again, this is one of many papers that we've studied, right? So I can give you a whole list of them, but as I said, I had some of these available to me. I had a bit of a problem this morning with that. So I can forward this one to you, but this is not the best paper, but it's a good, gives you an idea of it. Do you want to forward that to you?
Yes, feel free to do that, and we can include the link in the YouTube chat or the comments if I get it after the conclusion of the stream. But in the meantime, I wanted to highlight some of our viewer comments. So Daria Halturina writes, "Thank you for working in this neglected area." Bruce Davis writes, "Truly noble pursuit, Zach, people over profit." And Alan Crowley writes, "Indeed, thanks for the price consciousness. Things like taking a walk or quitting smoking could help with healthy longevity." Also, Alan is a bit of a humorist. He writes, "And a man, he's been supplementing with M&Ms."
Okay. So, okay. So this is one. This one I've sent you is on premature menopause, right? So this is what it started off, and this is one of the issues about. In answer to your question, thank you very much, Daria, for that. Yeah, 50% of the human race is women. Number one, and number two, I think that we are very male-driven in the science community, and I am a man, as you can see, but I've been surrounded by a lot of very accomplished women in my life and my family. So maybe for me, that's something that has never been a big issue for me. So I think it's just important that at the point of being able to do things very well, you have issues like brain fog and sort of issues like that with menopause. In terms of the noble pursuit, yeah, well, I'm not that noble. I've got to still pay the rent. So, let's be realistic about that. But you're right. This is what it's about. It's about us thinking on a not just such a sort of level of back to think in terms of the Greek, the polis, the city of your community. It's very important, and that is a very important thing to have. And I think we have to think about not just ourselves and what I can get out of you, because that sort of doesn't really work. And if you look at it societally, we do go into these cycles, and we've gone through a cycle of growth, bust, and reassessment, and we're about to have another crisis cycle, depending on whether you believe in all of the types of cycles that we have, and they are different in different societies. But we do have that issue now that we are going through a cycle of crisis and reassessment of who we are as a group of people. And so, if I can feed my family and have a meaningful purpose to life, and I have some fun and do what I can do, then really what more is there? I mean, how much am I meant to have? How many cars am I meant to have? And it doesn't make sense. It's not necessarily noble. I think it's more, thank you for that, but it's more practical and just functional, really.
Yes, thank you for that context. And indeed, that does essentially focus us on what should really matter in our lives. And that, I think, is a kind of focus that many people, unfortunately, have misplaced at some point in their lives. And it's good to get back to that. So we have a question from Ben Ballweg, which is a kind of open-ended question, but I think our viewers would be curious about whether there's anything else in the Austin Biotec pipeline that you would like to share that you haven't discussed yet.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we will be, as we said, because we're trying to sort of tailor it for people so that they can have different levels of buy-in into this principle. We are starting to release these peptides in terms of a form of serum as well as through pills that will actually mitigate the effects of aging. And again, these are very bespoke in the sense of you have to have done the baselining first. So you don't just go, oh, I want to take this peptide, or I want to take that pill, or you know what? No, you have to still go through the basics so you have your baseline. And so the reason why we do that is because one of the big hallmarks of aging, as they talk about in the what's one of the technical terms? It's oh god, what's it called? Look, I'm getting aging now. No, that's me. I'm senescent already. Proteostasis. So like the proteins, right? Getting a state of protein, keeping uptake of proteins. So a lot of that has a knock-on effect. If you don't have muscles in your body, you have issues with keeping your system, your metabolic rate, working or functioning well. So what we've discovered is we have like 3 basic types. One's called the skin pack. One is called the sort of fertility pack or the bone pack, actually, although we realized that fertility and bone pack might be a sort of wrong use of names. And then the other one is the sort of corporeal pack, or the core, CORPS, or the body pack. So one is for muscles, one is for elastin, and the other one is for hydration in a very simple sense. So that would be something that we have at the moment, and it's available very soon. At the moment we only work with the candidates directly. So what we're doing now is we're putting in a structure whereby you can come to us and then you can just do the little bit at the beginning, and you don't need to do the rest of it. You don't need to do the stem cell procedure. Maybe you might not need it for 5 or 10 years. I mean, why, if you don't need it, why have it? And if we do our job right, then you'll be coming back to us anyway. So that's that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Zack. And we do have now the paper that you shared. It is entitled Premature Menopause and All-Cause Mortality and Lifespan Among Women Older Than 40 Years in the N. Haynes Epidemiologic Follow-Up Study Propensity Score Matching Analysis. That's the rest of the title, but here is the link to anybody who would be interested in reading this further. Now, we have 2 minutes left in our salon today, and I think we can get in a brief answer to this question from Daniel Tweed, who wonders if we more aggressively mine existing health data, will we get a treasure trove of new healthy lifespan prospects, perhaps with citizen science methods? So I think he's asking, is there some sort of insight or possible treatment that could be discovered just by looking at existing data that we just have no idea about, but we could apply data mining techniques to? What do you think about that possibility, Zack?
Absolutely. We've already been starting doing that already with, there's a lot of, especially when you look at early intervention issues, working with a fellow called Walter Crompton, who's done some early intervention with childhood development. There's a lot of data out there already. We just need to know how to find it. The problem is that when you get that data, you've got to make sure there's no conflicting data with it. So, it's all well and good having lifespans or menopausal women, but if you then discover that all of that subset are alcoholics, chain smokers, then that's not really going to be very useful. So that's the sort of area we're looking at the moment, but there's quite a lot of data out there. So that's what we've been doing a lot of our research on already, and then applying that data to the very small sample size that we have right now. I agree, that's one of the benefits of AI, absolutely.
Yes, and we live in a hopeful time because AI has yet to be fully harnessed for the benefit of medical research. We have just been seeing the beginnings of that, and there's a tremendous amount of promise in that area. I've also shared a second link that Zack provided to a paper entitled Reproductive Longevity and Aging, Geroscience Approaches to Maintain Long-Term Ovarian Fitness. So please take a look at this link if you are interested. And I would like to thank Zack for spending this time with us. It was a fascinating discussion, a great follow-up on our previous salon, and I am excited to see what the future will bring. And hopefully next time we have you on, we will have some videos from your patients as well. This is truly a remarkable endeavor, and I think many of our audience members agree. So thank you, as always, for our highly engaged audience. Thank you for our panel, and thank you again to Zack. I hope we can all live long and prosper.